This is now week 3 since the LA fire started. And on January 7th, my kids were at school when the fire started. My husband was at his office in Santa Monica, so it's just myself and our nanny. And then about 10:30 in the morning, my nanny sent me a video of smoke occurring just north of us. And even though we had red flag warnings the night before, we have red flag warnings all the time in California, so didn't think much of it. And even though I had saw the video of the smoke happening, my initial reaction wasn't to evacuate, it wasn't to pack everything. It was, okay, the fire department will come and put out the smoke. Well, that didn't happen. By 11 o'clock, I was right back into my office and I was just working. My neighbor had called, and that's when I knew it was serious. Went out to the backyard, and within 30 minutes, flames were already flying into our backyard hillside. And at that point, I knew there wasn't much time, and we had to leave. And I was very much in panic mode. And no matter how many times we've replayed a scenario in case of an emergency, these are the things we need to pack. All of that was just lost in that moment. I was frantic, packed up all of our laptops. That was the first thing I could think of, because all of the documents wouldn't be recovered. So grabbed all of our laptops, was looking for my kids' iPads, because I knew if we were evacuating, they would be really upset with me if I didn't bring their iPads and their laptops. Couldn't find one, frantically running around the house looking for it, and then finally just decided to leave. All of that happened probably within 15 minutes. Didn't think to bring our documents, didn't think to bring our passports, even left our Chanel wedding bands in my closet, and just got the laptops. My patient files, I brought my patient files, and then just left. And even as I was driving off with our nanny, my trunk was still open. I hadn't had time or even to think about closing the trunk, and had to pull over. It took us 2 hours to get from our house to the PCH, which was just 3 miles away, because everyone in our neighborhood were also trying to evacuate at the same time. And if you've seen the videos, there were some people who had to abandon their vehicles to flee. We left, and thank goodness my husband was quick to think to book us into a hotel, because he remembered the Brentwood fire where we lived previously in 2018, and there were no more hotels. People were struggling to find hotels, so at least he thought about booking us into a hotel. And by that point, the fire had already grown from, just smoke to 200 acres within 30 minutes to 1,000 acres within that day. We knew we needed to get essentials. We didn't have toothbrush, toothpaste, underwear, socks. So we quickly went to Target to pick those up, because I wanted the kids to feel as stable as possible. I knew that was a very important thing, at least for kids, to feel safe, some sort of stability. So we got all the essentials that we could quickly find, and then we went to pick up our kids from school. And by that point, it was already looking very apocalyptic. We picked up our kids. They had heard about the fire already, obviously. They saw what was happening. though they didn't know that our home was affected. So we let them know that the fire was in the Palisades, that we didn't know whether our home was standing or not. We had no information at that point. And thank goodness we have close family friends, and one of the families invited us over for dinner to just give us an escape. Their daughters have been really close friends with our sons since preschool. So that was a nice distraction for the kids to have. And at that point, it was just shock and survival mode. I think at this point, the thing that kept running in my mind was all the things that I had forgotten to take with me. And guilt was a huge thing. And I know, talking with a lot of the families that I work with, guilt is a huge part of this experience. There's anger, guilt, grief. But the truth is, guilt isn't helpful at this point, because you need your energy to focus on how to survive. So had to quickly put the guilt away. And it took a lot of effort to do that, and just focus on survival mode. Focus on, okay, what is the next thing that's needed? And there's just so much that you have to think about when you are in this situation, when it's a disaster and you have to evacuate. And I think the thing that helped us to not feel so isolated and not feel so alone amongst the mountain of tasks that we had to burden ourselves with are the connections that we have, or is the social support that we had. And that is just so important, is to have that social support, to be with people, to share your stories, to just be together, to stand strong together. We had so many family and friends who called us. I mean, so many called us, was there to support us. The Palisades community is a very strong one. Everyone was sharing information to make sure that we all knew what was happening. We all had resources of what was next steps, sharing the fire map to see whether each of our homes were still standing. And then the outpour of love and support from even total strangers, willing to give a hand to help us, to be supportive. I mean, that sense of community is still there, even though we don't have a community anymore, even though the whole Palisades is burnt to ashes. People makes a community, and we had a lot of people who were standing with us, and that helps to not feel so isolated. A lot of people also offered us their homes, who were so generous, though I knew that it was important for kids to have stability, to feel safe. And one of the best ways to do that is to maintain routine, maintain familiarity, maintain connections. So it was important for us to stay in the local area, for us to have our kids to still go back to school, have their friends. And oh my goodness, the friends that they have and the school families were just so supportive. Making sure that our kids had what they needed, getting us luggages because we're moving from room to room and all we had were bags. Making an album for our kids and sharing their notes to uplift our kids' spirits. spirits. Those are all things that helped us to feel connected, that we were not isolated, that we aren't alone in this. And those things are important. I think you have to limit your exposure to the news, and especially when you have young children around. We have 8-year-old twin boys. It's important to make space for them to have these conversations. It's important for them to be able to express what they're feeling. And it's also important for us to foster a sense of resilience for them by sticking with the routines, by eliminating the negativity around what was happening in the disaster, by involving them in rebuilding. So just this past weekend, we had to get sheets for the boys, and we involved them in picking out their own sheets and things like that, so they feel like they have some sense of control over such a uncontrollable situation. That helps our children to feel safe. Having that sense of community, encouraging expressions of emotions at your own pace, at your children's pace, reminding yourself of how resilient you are. Even though there are so many tasks at hand, you can only do so much in a day. So prioritizing all of the demands, whatever is most urgent to your survival today. Pick your top 3 things today. Focus on that. Tomorrow, there will be other things, and the next day, there will be other things. Taking manageable steps without adding unnecessary guilt, because the guilt is only going to take your energy away, and you need a lot of emotional and mental energy right now. Focusing on each other. Yes, we've lost our home. We've lost so many irreplaceable memories, and we can make new ones. We can make new memories. We can rebuild. We have each other. And because we have each other, then we can heal. Because we're a support for each other. Those are the next steps.